From KFC mini cricket space into the next level of hardball becomes a challenging one. Like our CEO has highlighted, we're looking at a meso cricket program which will assist us, especially in environments where there's challenges of infrastructure, to allow us to keep the kids longer participating in the game, because that's one of the key fundamental issues that we need to look into. But from a coach's perspective, we also, even being involved in this space, you are looking at how to advance them, how to keep them excited, and so our appetizers, like sending them to a national seminar, for example, plays a pivotal role to make sure that the volunteers get involved. But the most important thing that's facing us at this point in time is also introduction of safeguarding, because we're dealing with kids out there, but most importantly also we need to safeguard them and make sure that their participation in the game becomes one of a positive experience, and that's one of the educational issues that we try and motivate the volunteers and school them accordingly.
Are you guys doing this on a event only, or you do go out for the kids in everyone as well?
No, I mean, we all over our footprint for KFC mini cricket. Like they said, we're in 6,600 schools around the country, and predominantly we in the disadvantaged environments as well as in the rural areas. The barrier for those kids to transition into hardball, that's where facilities becomes a key barrier for us. But the issue, that's why we're saying that shouldn't be a limitation for the guys to actually transition. We're always looking to identify talent. That's why our members on the scorecard, for example, there's a key element as part of their KPI to always identify talents and say how many of these kids are actually being groomed to move into the next level, because that's the key fundamental issues. The more diverse we are, because talent is even in every corner of South Africa. So the important thing is how do we nurture that talent and taking it through to the next level. And I know there was a question earlier asked around players progressing into the next level. I think before the age of 13, we see that players are more or less, from a talent perspective, they're more or less similar. It's only when it comes to when they move into high schools where you find that now, because they're exposed in much more better conditions and all that, the gap in terms of performance that's happening at that level. But the key fundamental issues as well is the parental support. Because the parental support at high school, for some of the guys, you find that the parents can pay for their private coaching and other issues to make sure that they advance, which leaves someone who cricket is playing a parental role as well for some of these kids that we're identifying and all that. It's not like they come sometimes with a support from parents and all that. If there's one area that we need to improve, it's always to take the family as well in the journey with. Because some of these kids, they're coming from an environment where there's extreme impoverished environments, and we want them to advance, and in doing that you can't leave the family behind. You need to try and find ways of how do you take them as part of the journey, but also keep the kids honest relative to their progress.
As mini cricket has been introduced in the most disadvantaged areas, does Cricket SA follow up on those kids that are part of this program on how they progressing?
100%. I think you'll be shooting in the dark if you didn't have the statistics and the numbers that we've shown you today, because there are real people behind the numbers that you saw, and those people have ambitions as well of donning the green and gold and become part of the Proteas. That's the ultimate departure point, because they can see the likes of Makayas or the likes of Neil Mackenzie's, and they want to be like them. And so the issue which is very vital is to make sure that we keep our objectives on the ground honest, because we like dealing with honest information. We just want to make sure that when a kid gets registered and they say they played an active match of mini cricket, that they are on our mainstream database so that we can see whether how many games have they played as well, because that's one of the key issues of tracking them. And then the issues which is very important around our pathway is that we also track the place of origin. You can end up playing at the Cares, for example, but we always go back and say, where did you start your cricket? And you find that some of the, especially your players from the disadvantaged environment, they started at this KFC mini cricket footprint, and they graduated into some of our hubs, for example. So we have to just check, because if you don't have those checks and balances and even a framework of transitioning them to various mechanisms, it becomes a bit of a mess at some point. So, but one of the key fundamental issues as well is to draw a framework that brings all these programs together, because our schools program, as most of the people will only know the traditional cricketing schools. But since we've re-engineered our programs in 2016, actually we started having, at least when it comes to the selection of under 19 teams, you can go and check your records. They're coming from anything between 9 to 13 schools a year, which was unheard of before. And it's purely because of the strategies that we've put in place around the hubs, but also around the focus schools. Because the focus schools are schools that were predominantly in the white areas. And when the demographics of the society changes, they have a demographic profile of 70% black. And then normally those schools, you find that they lose their appetite. They have the infrastructure and everything, and we need to try and get such schools behind the production of players. And we have 33 of those that CSA is funding and supporting, because we don't fund schools cricket. But for those 33, we fund them and try and assist them in mapping up. And the results since 2016 speaks for themselves in terms of the amount of players that are coming through the pathway from that intervention.
And okay, just lastly, in 2027 we'll be hosting cricket. Is there a way of bringing some of these kids closer to the game?
No, I mean, that's a given. I mean, a World Cup at home only happens once in a lifetime for some of the people. And for some of us that were there in 2003 when we hosted the World Cup, we still have the pain of more or less being bombed out at that particular time. And I've said it in various platforms to say 2027 is not negotiable, it's a must. The players must know that it has to remain here at home, and we need to drive such. And in doing that, we also need to inspire the generation that's coming with. And we can't do that preparation in 2027. It all starts now and how we're involving them in the game. So there are various initiatives that we're driving, especially with the engagements that we're having with the Department of Education as well as the Department of Sport, to try and make sure that we can galvanize. And all the work started at the KFC seminar as well, where we're trying to make sure that the coaches that are operating in this space understand that there's a World Cup in 2027, that they have an active role to play. Because those are the type of issues when we start throwing the stats there to say players have came through the program. People don't understand it. And we had a heartwarming moment at the KFC seminar itself, where Petlukwayo, for example, was one of the players that was invited to come and address the delegates. And the person who was sitting as one of the volunteer coaches that came into the process was actually the first person that introduced him into cricket. And that heartwarming, you can't buy, you can't script that. That's why this program is real. And those are some of the key fundamental issues that as part of the 2027 journey, we need to make sure that we take people along. And that journey starts now. Yeah.
Lastly, in terms of the hubs, do you feel like we're working, specifically in terms of the hub in Potchefstroom, the progression from mini cricket into the Dragons is not that great? So do you feel like maybe there's something to work on there?
No, I think the important thing around the hub program is around how we place them. So in some areas you find that they become the part and parcel of the main leg structure. For some of them it's more or less how they transitioning the players and feeding into the main issues. So we have teething issues in certain areas, and in certain areas you find that the model is working quite well. The important issue is that are they coaching kids? And our kids more or less being identified from that environment, also being progressed to the various levels. So it's not a perfect program as such, but it has given us some gains. If you check in some of the stats that we've released of late, I can send you and you'll see it for yourselves that since 2016 right until now, the uptake in terms of players that are making the various provincial side tells you the amount of work that's been done in specific areas. So some of the challenges that we experience with some of the hubs could probably be linked to the support that they're getting from offices and all that. But the most important thing is just to try and make sure that we can pick it up and try and how we can move up and to try and improve the setup. Because without that program working, it's going to be very difficult to build the player base, especially that we're looking for to try and divest the sport higher up.
Yes.